Hey guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to the Fangirl Freaks Out Podcast. This is your host, Alyssa. Woo! I have a little bit too much energy right now, so prepare for like a very energetic and hyper and all over the place podcast episode. I firstly want to start off by just saying, giving a little update. This episode and the next episode will be recorded like back to back because I will be visiting family here soon, and all my equipment for this is back in my apartment from school, so I won't be able to record. So I won't be able to see feedback on this episode, but there's a little bit of that. But yeah, there was other things I wanted to say, but I can't think clearly or straight right now because, like I said, I am like very hyper and energetic right now due to medication, and it's got me all over the place and scatterbrained. I'm already scatterbrained, and this medication doesn't help with that. But it is what it is. Anyway, so for this episode, I will be talking about UA students more. I'm going to, so that it's not too long of an episode, I will be focusing on class 1A, but just talking about how I think they got into UA, or how I'm confused as to how they got into UA, and more particularly like the hero course and stuff like that. And I'll explain in a little bit more detail where that this thought process came from. So yeah, this is the third episode of this podcast. And let's get into it. How did they get into UA? The question on everybody's mind, I feel like, when it comes to certain characters, mainly Hagakurei, but we will get to her in a minute. Speaking of Hagakurei, though, I want to quickly point out that I have a tendency to pronounce their characters' names wrong, because the way my brain works sometimes is it breaks it down by syllables first. So like Hagakurei, like that's how you say her name, but sometimes I will say Hagakurei because, like I said, my brain tends to like break down syllables. Same thing with last week's episode. I think I said Tamaki, which I know some people pronounce it that way. Some people say Tamaki. It's just a matter of like how you say it and the pronunciation and the breakdown of the syllables. So yeah, like you will hear me probably pronounce names differently or weird or wrong or whatever throughout the entirety of this podcast anytime I talk about My Hero Academia or any like anime in general. It's just the way my brain breaks it down for some reason, and that's just how it comes out. So anyway, on to like the topic of this week. So how did they get into UA? Well, okay, so the thought originated from a conversation I had, or it was originally a thought I had, and then I like brought it up to my brother, who also is a fan of the show, and I was like, wait a second, if the entrance exam to get into UA and the hero course is the same as the one that the students like do, then if you really think about it, it's like, how did certain characters get in? My main thing was Aizawa, because it's like, well, Aizawa's quirk is an eraser quirk, so he can't really use that on the robots, right? And he didn't have his capture weapon when he was like trying to get into UA. Like that came later, after. Sorry, I'm like there's gonna be a bit of messing around and stuff because I'm trying to fix settings. I recently just changed my setup a bit, and things got moved around and changed, and I trying to make sure that the audio doesn't peak too much or like become hard on the hearing. But anyway, yeah, so back to what I was talking about. Aizawa, it's like when you think about it, and I love Aizawa, don't get me wrong, but it's like, how did Aizawa get into UA? I have no doubt that he was smart or is smart and like past the written part, but like when you consider the the practical, I can't speak, practical part where they had to fight the robots, if it was the same, because we don't know how it was back then like how would he have passed, But I mean, if it wasn't for him getting into the hero course, we wouldn't have him where he is today. And I can't say that I am so happy that we have him as a character and as a pro hero. And yeah, some people would argue with me on that, on if he's a good mentor, teacher, whatever. But there's elements where I would say, like, yeah, he is. And that's not the topic of discussion today, but yes. But then I saw someone, I can't remember if it was on Twitter or if it was on TikTok or where I saw this, but someone had brought up, like, Present Mike and Midnight and how their quirks as well would be useless against robots. Like, Midnight's, I get, because it's like, well, the robots can't necessarily smell, unless she used her quirk to make other students fall asleep so she could steal their points, or like, if I'm probably not making any sense right now, but like, if she was near other students that were near a robot and she knocked them out so that she can get the robot for herself and get those points that way, then maybe I could see how she could, like, have done well there. I don't know. I think this episode was mostly just gonna tackle, like, how do they pass the practical part. Although some students, I will have to get into, like, the written exam part of it or whatever. And then Present Mike, I'm like, I can see how Present Mike passed it. I mean, he has his yelling, I forget the actual name of his quirk right now, but, like, he has that going for him. Granted, yeah, he didn't have his hero costume, which had the support item that makes it even louder, but I think still, like, the fact that noise, especially high frequencies of noises, can, like, interfere with technology and how that works. I think that's probably how he got into it. So I could see it. I can see it. I could see him also, too, because he's such an outgoing person, like, teaming up with other students and stuff. And then them seeing, like, well, he works well with others, so this is definitely, like, a good student to have in the hero course, because hero work is all about teamwork and all that, So, yeah. But then I started to, from that thought process, I started to think more and more about, like, well, how did the other student, like, the class 1A students work and get, like, how did they get into class 1A? Like, we already know that Momo and Toto got in through recommendations, so, like, that one, those two are taken care of. That's easy. Also, too, they're both, like, smart and got powerful quirks, so it makes sense. Also, too, the recommendation exam to get into UA is different from the non-recommendation, the normal exam, entrance exam. And then, too, so I'm currently looking at the midterm rankings and stuff like that. Oh, also in the quirk apprehension test rankings, because that's going to be the basis of, like, a lot of my thought process today. But yeah, so on the quirk apprehension ranking test, we have Momo came in first. She got in on recommendation, so we already know how she got into class 1A and UA in general. Same with Shoto, recommendations. Also is the son of the number 2 hero, now number 1. Makes sense. He's also, like, smart academically, maybe not so much socially, but that's what we love about him. Number 3, we got Katsuki Bakugo. We already know this fool has a powerful quirk, and I believe he ranked 1 in the entrance exam. I think that was the this is, like, early on in the series, so I could be wrong and remembering incorrectly, but my air just clicked on. I don't know if that's gonna pick up, but hopefully it doesn't. I don't know. Anyway, that's besides the point. I probably won't edit that out, just for context, if the air can be heard. But anyway, yeah, no. So Bakugo, we know, has a powerful quirk. He is smart, and it just kills me too, because he gets painted as a delinquent just because of his loudness and just aggressiveness. But it's like, this guy is super smart, does all his, like, schoolwork and stuff like that. Also, this fool goes to bed at 8 p.m. Like, how is he a delinquent? If anything, it's some of the other students. But yeah, it makes sense that Bakugo did well because I believe he placed first, had like the most points in the entrance exam, and then two on the practical part where they fought the robots and stuff, and then two, he's smart, so it makes sense that he did well on the written part as well. Next, based off of the, I'm just gonna go down the list of like the quirk apprehension tests and then like mix in some of the midterm rankings for like my thought process on how I think they did on the written thing or written test. So number 4 was Ida, which makes sense. Like how, I mean, we saw him a little bit before the entrance exam started with his interactions with Izuku, which when you look back on it, it's kind of like funny now seeing that they're like best friends and stuff. And Ida is not the same that he was. Like he was such a, just a jerk. But I mean, he can still be kind of annoying, but like that's besides the point. But yeah, like his, how we can see, or how we see that Ida can use his quirk in the sense that he uses not only the speed, so he was able to probably find robots faster than most students, but also too he can use that speed and the power in his legs to cause destruction and like kick and destroy these robots. Like that makes sense as to like, I think he could have scored really well in the entrance exam. Also too, he is smart as well. He placed second in the midterm rankings, so that just shows like how smart he is and how well studied he is. And yeah, so I can definitely see how he passed the written exam as well. And then, oh, before I like continue down this list, let's talk about Izuku for a second, because we already know how he passed because he's the main character, so it tells us this. But he got the rescue. Oh, I guess I could have talked about the rescue points for other people. Or, I mean, I guess I only talked about 2 students so far. I'll go back and cover that. But Izuku's rescue score is what helped him in the entrance practical exam. And also, too, we know that Izuku's a smart student. He actually placed 4th right after Katsuki on the midterm exam. So it makes sense that, like, he passed the written part. And, like, we know he didn't get any, like, combat points, but he got, like, rescue points from the exam, the practical exam. So, like, that's how he got into UA. So, like, we already know all that information. That's already covered, and it makes sense. But I do want to talk about, this is going to actually be the next episode right after this, like, the thought of, like, what if Izuku was quirkless and stayed quirkless, and how I think he would have fared in the entrance exam, and, like, what that would have done to the story. But that's next episode. So, after this one, it'll be released next week, so look out for that one. But anyway, going back to thinking about rescue points, actually, I think Ida might have been able to get some rescue points, because I can see Ida being the type to, like, lend a helping hand and all that. So he would definitely, like, probably score some rescue points. Also, too, with his ability to move fast, like, that makes sense. As for Katsuki, I can see him, like, he does actually, like, care and will rescue people, but I feel like to place as high as he did in the entrance exam, he had to have, like, not cared as much, and just not have rescued really anybody. Maybe a person or two, but, like, I don't think he really had any rescue points, if I'm being honest. But his character development later shows that he probably would have scored some had he had the same mindset then. Okay, so next on the apprehension test list after Ida is Tokuyami. Now, I can kind of see, like, how Tokuyami did well in the entrance exam because of Dark Shadow. Like, I mean, come on. Tokuyami did place 3rd in the sports festival. Like, it makes sense. Like, this dude is strong and his quirk is strong. But also, too, it's like, well, if you remember, like, the area in which they were doing this was, like, very brightly lit because it was, like, daytime. So how strong Dark Shadow was during that time, and also, too, how much control Tokuyami actually had over Dark Shadow at the time is very questionable. but I can see him doing very well in the entrance exam. So it makes sense that he got into UA, in my opinion. As far as like the written portion, I mean, I'm looking at the rankings now for the midterm exam, and he placed 14th. So I mean, he might have done okay. I think maybe the practical exam, or like the potential they saw in him as a hero in that aspect, maybe saved him. But I don't think he like would have done horrible on the entrance exam, like written part. But who knows? I don't know. Like, also too, you have to understand, like, and I'm taking this into consideration, that the midterms, like, they from then had like learned different material and are testing on different things. And yeah, so you can't like accurately say like, oh, because they did poorly on this, but like it gives you a general idea of like how they are as students and like learning and taking like written tests. Like it gives you a sense of like how they are at that. But I will recognize like maybe not completely, you know. But yeah, so that's Tokuyami. Next is Shoji, which again, like I can see how, granted, like when we see Shoji using his quirk, it's him being like a scout and all that, and not very much so much combative, but like I could very much see him using his quirk to find the robots in the entrance exam, and then being able to get there faster than other students, and then like using that to his advantage and finding methods to like take them down. So like I can see him doing well in the entrance exam. I don't think there's like a like list of where they place in the entrance exam. At least I'm on the wiki right now, the fandom wiki, and I'm not seeing one. I'm just seeing the ones that I've been using. But yeah, so I think he did well on that. Also too, when it comes to like written tests, he placed 10th on the midterm. So like, yeah, again, like I could see him doing probably well on the written portion, and like did it like a decent job on both. And it's like, yeah, compared to like other students, this is like he's a good fit for the hero course. So like that makes sense to me, you know. Also too, just the way that Shoji is built, like this man's is built like tall and like muscular. And that's like the best way I can explain it right now, because my brain, like I said, is like all over the place. But yeah, so Shoji makes sense. Most of these first ones are gonna like kind of make sense to me. But like when we get to like some of them, I'm gonna be like, I don't even know. Next on the list, Ojiro. I love Ojiro. He's such an underrated character. So is Tokuyami and Shoji, honestly. But like Ojiro, okay, so practical exam. I can see him doing well, like using his tail to his advantage. I don't know if they fully explain like how his tail works, but from what I see and like just how I perceive it to work is like his tail's got like strength, and like it's, you know, like he can just hit something and knock it out with it, like, you know, like I can see him swinging his tail at the robots, and then it just knocks them down, and like, hey, those are points. Those are like your villain points or whatever it's called, combat points. And also too, oh yeah, same with Shoji and Tokuyami. Like I can see all three of these, Tokuyami, Shoji, Ojiro, like getting some rescue points maybe along the way. You know, I don't know. We only really see the rescue points put in place for Izuku. Same with Ochaku, kind of, really, if you think about it. But yeah, no. So we don't really know like if any of them benefited from that other than Deku. I'm struggling with words now. But yeah, so Ojiro, like I can see how he got into like UA's hero course. Like that makes sense. That almost didn't come out right, but it's okay. Kiri Kiroshima is next. He placed 8th on the quirk apprehension test. And okay, so here's where like I get a little bit confused, but like it also makes sense at the same time because like with Kiri's quirk, it makes sense that like he was able to harden himself and like punch and destroy um robots and stuff, but at the same time it's like, I mean, a hardening quirk you could only do so much with, but I mean, maybe he because he is definitely the type to rescue other people and like lend a hand and be that friendly manly guy, because he is very manly. um but yeah, when it comes to that, it's like I'm not sure. Also too, when you think of like the midterm rankings, Kiri also didn't place that well in the midterms, so I don't know, because I feel like it's so weird to think about like some of the students who did not do well on the midterms and stuff like that, because it's like they're not particularly dumb, they do seem smart, and like when it comes to certain scenarios they can really be bright. But yeah, like we see Kiri like go to Bakugo saying like he's struggling with classes and like he's having a hard time, and asks for like advice and to be tutored essentially. So like we know like he doesn't do well when it comes to tests like that. So I can see like him not maybe doing the complete best on the written test, but like him doing well on the practical test. So that's how he got in. So yeah, I can see that. Um, Next is Mina. I can definitely see her getting in, no problem, because hello, she has acid against metal. Like, that makes sense. That works. Um, yeah. And then, too, if like she got rescue points, I could see her getting rescue points because of like the whole situation from middle school where she like came to the other girls' rescue and whatnot. So, Mina makes sense. Although, when it comes to her written portion, I can't say that I'm too confident that she did well on that. I mean, she did place 19th on out of 20 on the midterm ranking cuz she didn't do too well. Again though, like Mina doesn't seem like someone who's particularly dumb in any way, and none of these characters seem to lack that into like the intellect. It's just a matter of like maybe they just have a harder time when it comes to testing or like gain like retaining information and stuff like that, if that makes sense. I'm gonna particularly get into this when I talk about Dinky, because Kaminari, I feel like, yeah, I'll just get into that when I talk about him. But yeah, so I can see how Mina got in though, if you're like mainly focusing on the practical portion of the entrance exam where they're fighting the enemy robots, because of her acid and stuff like that. Like that just makes sense when going up against robots that are metal. I could not remember what I was trying to say there for a second. Okay, next is Ochako Uraraka. We kind of see a little bit into how she managed to get into UA too, because it went kind of hand in hand with Izuku's, and she, like her floating quirk, I can see how she could easily like get up to like the robots, and maybe, I don't know if she knows anything about mechanics, but like rip out their things, that their cords or whatever that shut them down, or just like doing something similar to maybe the sports festival where she like touches things and like drops them on top of the robots. Granted, we know like at the beginning their quirks aren't the absolute best, like they're not the best at using them yet because they haven't like developed them or whatever, because we see her like on the verge of vomiting rainbows or whatever when dealing with Izuku. But she also helped Izuku and others when it came to getting them to safety and whatnot, especially Izuku when he was like heading straight for the ground, and she like managed to touch him and float him and safely get him to the ground after being saved by him. So she definitely got rescue points, and she definitely, I could see her getting some combat points. And then when it comes to the written portion, I mean, she, again, like, she was ranked 13 on the exam, but I can see her doing, like, okay, like, passing, at least getting a passing grade on the written portion of the midterm, or the entrance exam. Like, that just, I can see that. We are, like, halfway through this list, and I should have brought my water bottle. It's okay. Next is Coda. First of all, Coda is just such a precious being. Like, I adore him. He's so adorable. I can't even put words to it, but I love him. But let's get to talking about this entrance exam, because, I don't know, it's questionable. He placed 11th on the quirk apprehension test, so, like, he's kind of there midway. And as for the, he also placed 11th he's just very middle of the road kind of guy. So yeah, I can see when it comes to the written portion of the entrance exam, I can see, because there is a written portion. I keep saying that, and I'm like, I'm not even sure anymore if there's a written portion, but I was pretty sure there was. Yeah, because anyway, that I'll get to that when I get to Mineta, because that was like the big argument when it comes to like Mineta being in class 1A. Anyway, I have thoughts on that, so I'll get to that when I get to him. But Coda, let's talk about him, because he is who we were talking about. He's very middle of the road, so I can see him passing and doing decently well on the written portion. And then when it comes to the practical part, I would say he would have done well. I don't know if he would have had access to like animals and stuff. You know, I don't remember if it was closed off or not, or if it was open air. Because like if it's open air and like he had access to like the birds and whatnot, like he could have used those as his way to like scout out robots, kind of like how Shoji is used for like scouting and whatnot. And but when it comes to actually attacking them, I'm not sure, unless he used like animals. Again, like I'm not sure. So we're starting to get into the territory where I'm like, I'm confused a little bit, but like I can kind of see where the potential there is, unless Coda was like one of those, because Coda is definitely like on a rescue team type of hero. Like I don't see him being very like combative in any sort of situation, unless absolutely necessary, or unless he's got like control of bears and deers and stuff that could like go on a rampage or whatever and attack people when need be. Like obviously, because you know heroes aren't supposed to like just attack people to attack, but yeah, no, like I can definitely see him being more of the rescue type hero, where and we've seen that too when the class 1A has done exercises where he's on the scouting team because he uses birds to scout, or if you've seen the movies, he was always part of the rescue team. So like that makes sense that he would be a rescue hero. So I could see him he definitely had to have gotten some rescue points to help him along the way, as well as I can see him maybe getting a couple like 1-pointers, like a few points from that on the practical exam. And then, like I said, the written, I can see him doing like decently well. I mean, he, like I said, is a middle of the road type of guy, so it makes sense. Sato is next. Sato makes sense because, I mean, the dude's buff. He's beefy. Like, that's literally his quirk, is just turning sugar to strength and muscle and, like, destroying things. So it makes sense that he did well on the practical part of the entrance exam. And he actually placed 12th. Him and Coda are literally just middle of the road. Like, Coda placed 11th on both the quirk apprehension test and the midterm, and Sato placed 12th on both tests as well. So yeah, so when it comes to Sato, like, definitely probably did well on the written exam, probably did well on the or definitely did well on the practical part when it comes to like destroying and beating up robots. Like I can definitely see, because I mean, I'm sure he was like allowed to eat sugar and stuff or whatever. Because I don't remember if the students were allowed to like bring any sort of support type gear with him. I mean, granted, Sato's is just food. He could have had snacks hidden in his pockets, but I don't know if they I don't know UA's rules on like checking for any sort of benefits or ways to help, beforehand. But that's English. That's besides the point. But yeah, so Sato makes sense to me for sure. Like, it makes sense that he got into 1A. Next is Sue. Love her. Sue, I could definitely see doing well. She placed 6th in the midterm ranking, so she definitely did well on the written part. She definitely passed with flying colors. And then as for the practical part, I could see her using she has that acidic mucus that we rarely see her use, but if she had to use it, she would have probably used it in the practical entrance exam. And then too, she's able to her frog abilities with her tongue or climbing up walls, or I think she can use camouflage. Because doesn't she use that in the class training exercises? I think so. I don't fully know. I'm spacing a little bit right now on my memory isn't that great. But yeah, Sue, I definitely can see how Sue got into class 1A, and also too, she's the most practical, smart thinker and responsible student, honestly, when it comes to 1A. So it's a good thing she's there, because they need her. But yeah, next on the docket is Aoyama. Aoyama definitely did well. I can see with his naval laser. He did well during the entrance exam. That aspect, the practical aspect, because he was definitely able to just shoot his laser and destroy those robots, 1-pointers, 2-pointers, whatever pointers. Granted, yes, he can't use it for long because it will hurt his tummy, but I can definitely see the naval laser coming in handy during that exam. So it really does make sense for him to have passed that practical part. Now, as for the written part, he also did not do well on the midterm. So I don't know if that's just because he didn't retain information well when it comes to actual schoolwork and stuff, because doing hero course work is different than regular schooling. So maybe he did do well. I don't know. I don't know. But he passed the written part on the final. I do have that list here as well. A lot of them passed their written finals. So I could definitely, they all had to at least pass the written part of their exam. Now, by how much really is the question here. And I think he didn't do too bad on the written. I wouldn't say he would. I mean, who knows though, it's up in the air, but I don't think he did too bad. I think he maybe had barely passed it. He did just well enough. And then the practical is where he thrived. But yeah, so definitely can see Aoyama passing. Next on the list of ranking 15 in the quirk apprehension test was Cerro, which I can definitely see him earning both rescue and combat points. He could have easily, with his tape, he could have just tripped a whole bunch of robots that brought him down, and he got the points there, or just wrapping them up in the tape, or pulling people out of the way of falling robots. There's rescue points there. I can definitely see why Cerro made it into the hero course though. He's another underrated character, in my opinion. I love Cerro. He deserves more appreciation. And when they called him so basic during the sports festival, I felt so bad for him. And he really looked hurt too. He's wow, that's what you had to say? And I'm Cerro, you do not deserve this slander. But speaking of the written part though, the final, he didn't do too well in the midterms, but like I said, I'm sure he passed. Maybe barely, but he passed. He did well enough to where it, like I said, I think for Cerro, his strengths would have been in the practical exam, where I could see him using his tape to tape up robots, trip up robots, save people, rescue people, the works, So Cerro makes sense to me. Next on the quirk apprehension test, the one that I wanted to talk about earlier, Denki Kaminari. So he actually plays 16th. So I can see how he would have passed like the practical part of the entrance exam, especially too if he's up against robots and he's like electric. Like he can short circuit them just as much as he short circuits himself, as long as he doesn't like overuse his quirk. But I can see him definitely, like, if he had enough robots in an area, could just use his quirk and short circuit all of them, and then that's a whole bunch of points right there. As for rescue points, I don't know if he would have gotten any. Maybe like a couple, but like I can see him like maybe possibly overusing his quirk and needing rescued himself. But yeah, like when it comes to Denki, like I hate that people paint him as like so stupid. Like I understand like he placed last in the midterm ranking. So when it comes to like the written part of the entrance exam, I can see him like passing, but like by maybe 1 point, or he just got the thing. But honestly, like Denki has his moments where he can shine. Like just earlier, I was reading the Team Up manga. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. Or the Team Up Missions manga. And I don't know if it's canon or not, but like in there's a moment where they're picking on Denki, and like he was the only one to come up with like, okay, so like the chapter that it was is like they're trying to help this little girl find the hero that had saved her from an attack or whatever, and they're going around trying to find the hero, and they come across Denki, Bakugo, and Monoma, because they were like one of the like agencies who would have been, they're at one of the agencies that would have been involved in the mission tied to the rescue or whatever. And the little girl's like, none of them are it, but they do all remind me of the person who saved me. And the others couldn't figure out who, like what it was about the three of them that like they had in common. And Ida was like, well, you're all talented, or you're talented. And Bakugo's like, I hope you're not talking about Denki. And they were like, of course not. And it's like, why? And Denki even is like, why do you have to hurt me so bad? And I'm like, if it wasn't for Denki's like dumb mode, there's quotes around that, but like where he short circuits himself, like if it wasn't for that, I feel like Denki would get appreciated much more and like not made fun of as much. And it's really the downfall of his quirk doing that I think like hurts his like intellectual ability, because obviously like if he's short circuiting his brain to that point, like it's gonna cause some damage, and it's gonna cause some like learning issues, like his capability to properly like retain information. I don't know the complete science behind that, so don't quote me on that. But I don't know. When it comes to Denki, it's like, I just feel like he's underappreciated in that aspect. And when it comes to that like chapter that I was reading from the Team Up missions, he literally was the only one to figure out. He was like, well, we're all blonde. And they were like, that's it. The little girl's like, that's it. That the hero that saved me was blonde. And it's like, see, y'all wouldn't have had that clue if it wasn't for Denki right there. Like, he's the one who figured it out, and yet y'all were just calling him stupid and stuff. Like, that's not fair, you know. But anyway, I can definitely see Denki doing well. Going back to the whole purpose of this podcast, I can definitely see Denki doing well on the entrance exam by like English. I'm speaking too fast, and now my brain is like struggling to keep up with me. But I can see him doing well by short circuiting some robots and getting points that way. When it comes to the written test, again, like I said, maybe he passed, but like barely, just because of his the usage of his quirk and how it can affect his brain. It made it harder for him to do well. But I mean, like I said, I don't think Denki is as dumb as people make him out to be. He definitely has his moments. Next. Anyway, that's my little rant about Denki. Next on the docket is Jiro. Okay, so when I think about Jiro and how she got into UA, I definitely think like her strength was the written portion. Like she placed seventh on the midterm ranking, so like she's a good student when it comes to taking tests and stuff like that. But she placed 17th on the apprehension test, which makes like sense to me because like her quirk is like her earjacks. So I could see her being able to use her quirk to find the robots. But when it comes to like actually defeating them or doing anything there, like she doesn't have her hero costume where she has like her speakers and whatnot and all that yet. So to me, it feels like it's almost like she has to fight quirkless in a way. Like all she's able to do is use her quirk to find them and locate the robots. But beyond that, like what else does she have, you know? And then it brings the question similar to like Aizawa, like you were essentially fighting quirkless. So how did that work? Unless she helped rescue people, which again we don't really know. We don't know this information unless that information is out there. And if it is, please direct me to it because I would love to learn more about like how each of these students placed and did in the entrance exam and how they got into UA. Because literally that is the point of this episode is like how did they get into UA? Like that's just the question I have on my mind. Like considering it, you know? So Jiro definitely did well in my opinion on like based off of what I know. I can definitely see her doing well on the written portion. As for like the combative practical portion of the entrance exam, I'm not 100% sure on how that went. But yeah, so that's Jiro. Next, the next two, I'm realizing because I already talked about Izuku, and he's like the last. Obviously, he placed last on the apprehension thing, but we already talked about him. But the last two are the ones who I question the absolute most on how they got into UA. The first one being Hagakurei. How that's all I can ask is how, because like I'm just confused. I am confusion. Like once she placed 18th on the quirk apprehension test, which that even confuses me too. Like how did she place so much higher than like Midoriya? Literally all her quirk is invisibility. So like unless she's really fit and we just don't know because we cannot see her, like how did she throw farther than him in the ball toss? How did she fare better than him in any of the other like aspects of the test, you know? Like I get that the reason why they put him last was for like suspense and like plot purposes, but like if you ask me, it would make more sense that Hagakurei plays last, because I mean in this point in time she doesn't really know how to do much with her quirk other than the fact that she's invisible. And there are so many other things too that like when it comes to Hagakurei, there's so much she could do if like she just, I feel like she doesn't do a lot honestly until like maybe recently in season 5, like she starts showing more like input. But like if you see the movies or anything else, she's kind of just there screaming and yelling like, oh my god, there's this going on or there's that going on, and it's like, do something then. Like you're a hero, you're supposed to be a hero doing something. Like unless it's very minimal and doesn't really require her to do any fighting or anything, then that's when she comes in handy. And I mean, yeah, I could see her being like a stealth hero, an underground hero, rescue hero, like along those lines, but I don't really see her being very combative. So when it comes to the entrance exam, I'm very confused on like what she did or how she fared during that. I mean, clearly she had clothes on because she did not have her approved hero costume. That is just her being naked with nothing but gloves and shoes, which that's still questionable, but that's besides the point. So she wasn't really invisible, and like that does nothing for the robots anyway. So like how does she, unless she's like I said, unless she's like super buff and we just don't know it, and like this girl is strong as ever, like I don't even know, like she can just throw a 1-2 punch and like knock some fools out. Like I don't see her doing well on the entrance exam. She also didn't do well on the midterm either, I don't think. She placed 16th. So okay, so like she might have done like okay on the written portion, or I think it might have been canon that she did well on the written portion and that's how she got in. I'm not 100% sure when it comes to that, but like I said, I don't understand how Hagakurei got in, and I feel like that's a lot of people's like general understanding of her situation is like, how did Hagakurei get in? And a lot of people like to argue, I'm not gonna do this whole comparison thing, but like a lot of people do like to argue, like, how did she get in over Shinzo? And like, I get that, because honestly, I don't understand how she got in, period. Forgot to mute my phone again. That is something I'm gonna have to remember to do. But yeah, so I don't get it. I mean, there's just so much more she could offer, I feel like, in the series, and she doesn't provide much as of yet. So I don't know. She's just one big question mark for me. I'm gonna be honest. I don't understand how she got into UA. And if she's your favorite, I'm sorry. I have nothing against Hagakurei. Like, her as a character outside of like the hero course and all that. Love her. Like, she brings a little extra element to something. Sometimes, when she's remembered by the other characters. Which, again, I feel so bad for the girl. Like, because her quirk is literally invisibility, she gets forgotten a lot of the time. But, like, I don't know. She does bring an element to the fandom, though, that's, like, kind of nice. But, like, when you consider, like, how does she get into UA, especially the hero course, it's like, how? How did you? But, yeah. And so, the last person I want to talk about this episode, which I feel like I'm going to get a lot of heat for a lot of the things I'm going to say. Some people will agree, some people will disagree, which, again, disclaimer, I am entitled to my opinion. These are all my opinions. I'm not saying any of this is fact. But yes, I am entitled to my opinions, as you are entitled to yours. And I ask that we respect each other in discussing this. Like, we can have healthy, friendly discourse about topics like this and not get, cutthroat. Like, it doesn't have to get that deep. It's not that serious. They're fictional characters. This is just a made up concept, show, whatever you want to, like, whatever. It's not real, so don't get too butthurt over it, is what I'm essentially saying. But the last person I'm going to talk about is Mineta, the arguably most hated next to Endeavor character in this whole series. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of Mineta either. And it's not just because he's pervy, which, granted, that is, like, one of the biggest pet peeves of mine, is just how perverted he is. And, like, there was the episode where they were doing the summer training camp, and he was, like, trying to get over the barrier that was separating the hot springs. Like, I physically had to pause the episode because I physically got sick from the thought of, like, just thinking about it is making me, like, not feel great again. But it's just, I know that's a big reason why everybody hates Mineta, just because of how perverted he is. But I still, beyond that, like, question, like, not only how did he get into UA, but how he is still at UA and hasn't got expelled. Like, I don't get it. First of all, he placed 19th right before, I almost said Midoriya, which is Izuku and Midoriya. Anyway, right before Izuku on the quirk apprehension test, which makes sense. Like, there's literally not much he could do with the balls on his head, his quirk. Like, thinking of how he fared in the entrance exam, all I can see him is maybe, like, sticking some robots, like, feet to the ground and, like, them tripping and falling, and, like, that's how he knocks them down. But other than that, like, he's small, and we all saw how big those robots could be. Like, I don't see him faring too well there. And I know that it's known that he, like, is actually pretty smart and did well. I mean, he did place 9th in their midterm ranking. So, like, I know that he did really well in his written portion of his entrance exam. And, like, that's how he got into the hero course. And that's the main argument that Mineta supporters like to bring. It's like, I get that, like, him doing well there. But, like, I don't see him doing well in the practical part. So I still don't understand how he got in. And then as for, like, how he's still there, I'm like, first of all, the sexual harassment to the girls of 1A or the female population in general should be enough to, like, expel him. But he's not. He's still there. also too, and they know this, they acknowledge it. Like Aizawa has acknowledged it. They saw it at the summer camp where they're like, yeah, that's why we put Coda up there as, you know, a way to like block him. Like we figured something like this would happen. It's like, if you already know that, then why are you allowing him? There's the whole thing there. But yeah, so but not only that, but we also see moments where Mineta is like very much like, we see this in the USJ situation where the whole time he's just screaming and complaining and like wanting to give up and is almost like cowardly in a sense. And that's not, you don't need that in a hero. You want someone who's going to not give up at the first sign of danger or at the first sign of defeat. And you also don't want a hero that's going to like automatically assume like there's no chance of winning, because then that's giving up or easily, and that's just going to result in people getting hurt. So, and also too, that like Aizawa has shown signs of like not really agreeing or accepting people like that, like heroes in training like that, because he understands like this is a serious job. You cannot have a moment of hesitation, because hesitation can lead to dangerous situations or deadly situations. And yet he still somehow has not expelled Mineta. There's a lot that I can say about Mineta, but I'm just gonna save that for maybe a later episode. I'll probably do a let's talk about it like later down the line, where I bring him up again and like talk about him, especially too because I know like if people hear this podcast that like Mineta and like will pose, we can have a whole discussion on it. Like I don't mind bringing it back up and like going over people's opinions on it, and you know, having a healthy, friendly discourse over it, like I had mentioned. But yeah, so that's essentially all of them. I don't think I missed anybody, but that's all of Class 1A. If you want me to do Class 1B, even though we don't see much of them and don't have much of an idea of them, I can definitely do that. Like if you want me to do like an analysis of how I think they got into UA, or if there's other characters that you could like say like, oh, they deserve, like Shinzo I know is one. Like I can talk about him though with Class 1B if that's something you guys would want me to do. But yeah, I think that's essentially all I have to say on like my thoughts on like how I think they got into 1A, and just like the thought process of like, if it makes sense to me or not that they're in 1A. But like for the most part, a lot of the students, it makes sense on how like they could have used their quirk to pass the practical part of the entrance exam. Some there's gray areas and questions there, like Jiro and Hagakurei, Mineta, Coda. Some of them, there's like I can see it, but it also is like, or I can't see it when it comes to Hagakurei and Mineta. But like Jiro and Coda, and like I can see it, but like it's a little I'm not completely sure. But like we also too know that they had rescue points were part of it, and then the written portion, which we don't fully know how like a lot of them did on it. But yeah, so that's essentially what I think happened when it came to like how they got into UA. And again, like it all started because I was thinking about Aizawa. I can't even say his name anymore. Aizawa, and how like he got in, and then people brought up like, well, Midnight and Present Mike probably essentially had a fight quirkless as well. But yeah, so that's all for this week's episode of the Fangirl Freaks Out podcast. Thank you so much for listening and tuning into it. If you did, don't forget to like if you enjoyed it, comment and let me know what you think. I would love to hear other people's opinions on how they think people got, like, Class 1A members got into UA. Or, like, about the 3 pro heroes that I mentioned back in their time in UA. And let me know if you want me to do this with Class 1B. I would be so into that. Or other students, you know, that we know of that are, or pro heroes that we know went to UA and stuff. I would be happy to do that. And because I'm sure there's a lot of thinking I could do when it comes to that. But yeah, and don't forget to subscribe and to not miss any future episodes, or look through my channel for the past episodes if you're interested in hearing those. But yeah, next week, because I do want to try to make this a weekly thing, I'm going to try my best to upload a podcast episode every week. But next week's episode, as I mentioned earlier, will be recorded like right after this, because I have to do some pre-recording. But next week's topic is what would the story have looked like if Izuku remained quirkless? Because I'm honestly, some people have brought up the point before, and honestly, like, the thought of that is kind of interesting. So I would like to like dive into that a little bit. So if you're excited for that, or would love to hear that, and tune into that episode and like provide your opinions and comments on it, then subscribe so you don't miss it, and tune in next week for that. But that's all for today. Peace.